So I mean, with all of the content I produce, it's always personal, but today this really hit home. I'm not sure when I'm going to release this video due to the nature of it, but you know, I want to talk a little bit about male suicide and something that I've experienced a lot of. I mean, for instance, my stepdad has lost three of his close friends to suicide, but this morning I got a call from my mum, and this really just kind of, you know, hit the nail on the head. I can't help but see the synchronicity in my life, and as sad and as tragic as the news was that I received this morning, I can't help but also notice how, you know, how relevant it was at the time where I'm producing this kind of content. And the news I received this morning was that my uncle took his own life last night. Chose to hang himself because of the struggle in which he was going through. And I was kind of aware of it, but unfortunately, as men, when we don't reach out, when we don't actually allow people to acknowledge how we feel, then we live in this way of dealing and trying to cope with the struggles that we find ourselves in. And so, you know, obviously my love goes to my uncle. What saddens me the most is not the actual passing and the loss of his life, but it's the amount of suffering in which he was going through that actually drove him to do this. And so in this video I want to just show what the imbalanced masculine energy looks like, so you can see it in your own life. Because the problem is, for so many of us, we're so identified with this way of thinking, with this way of being, that we can't even recognize that this is actually coming from trauma. This is actually from a perspective of imbalanced masculine energy. And so hopefully, I'm currently out on a beautiful walk, so hopefully the noise don't interrupt this video too much. But I want to talk about what the resistance is in man, and the kind of weight that he has on his shoulders. So this is something that I feel like a lot of men, most men, can verify in their lives, and that's this kind of feeling like you've got to do everything yourself, like you've got to hold everything together, that you're the carrier of everybody else, and that you've got to stay strong. And this is kind of like the masculine energy, the imbalanced masculine energy that we get ourselves into, where we feel like as men we can't actually be open to actually being helped and to receiving that help, to allow other people to help us. And so this is kind of like one of the dysfunctional ways in which, or one of the patterns in which men, that we live our lives. We don't show vulnerability. Now, I've been running Reiki, mindfulness, meditation classes. I've been doing all of these courses online, and 99.9% of the people that show up from are female. I very rarely ever get males turn up to the courses that we do. I mean, I've been doing one-to-one coaching with men, but that's private, that's over Zoom. These people, you know, men are not coming forward putting their hands up, because we have this barrier to vulnerability. We have this resistance towards being vulnerable. Because what we're really talking about when we're talking about vulnerability is we're talking about feelings. Being vulnerable to our feelings. You see, whenever we're not showing that vulnerability in our lives, we're not allowing ourselves to feel. And this is why, as men, as I've stated in other videos, that, you know, we're so numb to love because we're so numb to feeling. And when we're so numb to love and numb to feeling, we have to be focused on ways of escaping it. And so it's recognizing this numbness to love, and then understanding that the numbness to love, the only reason you feel the numbness to love is because you are in a state of resistance towards the feelings. Now, as men, we live in this state of resistance. We are in a pure state of resistance. This is what men are in. They're in a resistance to their feelings, because, as I've stated in another video, this within all men is this ball, this emotional ball of pain. And for thousands of years, for generation after generation, men have come through this and continue to repeat the cycles of the generations before, which is that false masculine bravado with a lack of feeling, with a lack of love. And so we have to recognize that vulnerability and understand that vulnerability, understand why we don't want to be vulnerable. And then when we allow ourselves to actually feel vulnerable, when we acknowledge the vulnerability, then we can acknowledge the feelings underneath that vulnerability, or the feelings that create that resistance to being vulnerable, to being open. And it's about acknowledging these parts of us in layers. We have to do this in layers. You can't just go from a state of resistance straight into a state of feeling and pure love and connection. It takes time, but it's about recognizing, and it's about understanding, and it's about allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Being vulnerable in front of other people, but being vulnerable to yourself, to actually allow yourself to have feelings, to actually allow yourself to feel. Because it's only when you begin to feel that you can begin to work through this emotional ball. And it is literally a ball. And when I first come into this emotional realization within myself, this ball was so overwhelming and so powerful, it was what was resulting in my anger. But actually, as the years have gone on, and as I've gone into this emotion more and understood it, I understand it. Like, I've been through it. I know everything there is to know about this emotion in men, because I've been through it myself. I passed through it. I still have this pain within me, but it's so minute, it doesn't control my life no more. It doesn't take me over. It doesn't create me to act in unhealthy ways. I have control of it. I have control of myself. And so, the way in which a man begins to change his life is how he relates to himself. And the only way we can really change how we relate to ourselves is to begin to acknowledge how we're feeling. We have to withdraw focus from our reality. We have to withdraw focus from the blaming and the accusing and making it everybody else's fault. And we have to begin to become aware of these reactions. Whenever you're reacting, that reaction is the first place you've got to begin to question, because when you're reacting, it's unconscious. You're unconsciously reacting, which means you're unconsciously projecting. You're unconsciously pushing something away from yourself. And this is the pain of man. The pain of man is unconscious to him. He's not conscious of it. He's not aware of it. And so one of the ways in which we become aware of it is we become aware of what we're projecting. We become aware of what we're expressing. We become aware of what we're blaming. And it's when we look into this identity, when we say stuff like, I can't trust anybody, or it says like, I've got to do everything myself. Now, if you've got to do everything yourself, what are you doing? What are you saying in that moment when you can't trust? What are you saying? What's this identity saying? What are you reinforcing? Don't talk to me like that. Who do you think you are? Where's my respect? Like, we're coming from places of hurt. When we don't trust, we're coming from a place of hurt. When we're trying to control, we're coming from a place of hurt. When we're demanding that people be a certain way towards us, we're coming from a place of hurt. The more we realise this, the more we actually see that the whole masculine nature is actually toxic. It's completely toxic, because it's a resistance to feeling. It's a resistance to feeling trauma. And because there's a resistance to feeling trauma, there's a resistance to feeling love. And when a man can't feel love, he becomes dysfunctional, because then he has to constantly get. He needs like a high, and he needs a fix, and he constantly needs to fix himself. And then there's no contentment, and there's no peace, and there's no connection. And so I do these videos for every man out there that's struggling. Is, you don't have to change how you are, you just have to see it. You just have to become more conscious of it. You just have to become more aware of it. It's only when we become conscious and more aware that we actually get the ability to change something. Because as I was saying, when something remains unconscious, when you're projecting and reacting and you're not aware of where this pain's coming from, you're not aware of the root of it, you're projecting it unconsciously. When you make it conscious and you understand, then you can begin to heal from it. And then as men, we don't actually need to be in a state of suffering. We are only in a state of suffering because we resist the suffering. We resist the healing. We resist the feelings. Which is really to resist your connection to love, to resist your connection to God. And you know, if man becomes responsible for how he feels, then he has the power to change woman, because woman, whether she's realized it or not, is the divine principle of pure love. The female energy, the feminine energy, is the receiver, the giver of life. And actually all a woman wants is to be loved. But in this world where men are not in connection with their love, when men are in so much resistance towards feeling their love, they project the unhappiness onto woman, and that makes woman unhappy. So now we have man that's unhappy, and we have woman that only wants to be truly loved. She just wants to be truly loved by a man, but she can't get that. She can't have that. And so that makes her unhappy. And so we now have masculine and feminine at war with each other, when really what they're actually seeking for is that counterpart in the other. What a man's seeking for is the love in himself, which is the feminine aspect of himself. You see, and all the time he doesn't have that in himself, he will try to control the feminine aspect in the woman. He will try to control and manipulate the female, because he doesn't have the love in himself. So anyway, I'm going to cut this one here on this video. You know, for the guys out there, I do a lot of one-to-one sessions with men. You know, I do them on Zoom. You don't even have to show yourself on the camera. But if you need to reach out, then do so. Like, hit me up, hit me on a DM. Like, there's no judgment in any of this. I've literally been through hell myself. I understand the journey, I understand the process. I understand the unconscious layers in men. I understand why men suffer. Be vulnerable. Allow yourself to feel. Till the next one, much love.